Well, it is now time for revolution. Not evolution, not a retool, not a remold, not a recreation, but a complete revolution at this club. If we are going to be back to compete again, back to where we belong, back to our rightful place at the top of the Scottish game, the place that we are expecting, the fans expect, that people expect this club, this great European power to actually be back where it belongs at the top of the Scottish game, winning leagues, winning cups, winning doubles, progressing in Europe and fighting on all fronts. Revolution needs to take place, not an evolution of this squad. I don't want to be sat here in 12 months, 16 months, 18 months' time having exactly the same conversation with you where we've got another new manager and we're talking about yet another rebuild and yet another retool of the squad. That cannot be allowed to happen. It's hoped, I think, that, with Niels Koppen now in place, that there will be an element where he is kind of more controlling of the players coming in. So it doesn't really matter who the manager is to some extent. But Philippe Clement, I think, will still have a big say on who comes and who goes. In effect, the squad needs to be ripped up, restarted, rebegun. And I know a lot of this depends purely on the board. And I'm not going to touch too much on the board in this video. I will make a video about the board and about what we need from them and what is expected of them and what the realistic chances that actually happening. But look, the board do need to back the manager. They do need to show ambition. If they do not want to show that ambition or cannot show that ambition to back Niels Koppen, to back Phil Clement, to back the football board, then they are not fit for purpose and should not be running our great club and need to clear off. But as to what needs to happen at this club, something needs to change. For too long now, we've kind of used a sticking plaster to try and cure a broken leg. And the club has been in that position, I think, now for the last 2 to 3 seasons. Since we won 55, there's been a kind of a sticking plaster mentality at the club rather than an actual, real root and branch reform and overhaul of this playing squad, of the way this squad is trained and conditioned, of the way that this club actually works off the field and on the field. This summer is absolutely vital. The faith we've got to place now in Niels Koppen and Philippe Clement is absolutely total. It is essentially down to them. Now, I know that the likes of James Bisgrove, Craig Robertson will play a role. I understand that. Of course I do. But for me, it has got to be a situation where those two, the football men in this building, are the ones who take responsibility for this rebuild. Now, what is the plan? What needs to be done in effect to turn this squad around? I think there's 4 elements that need to be placed for this club to succeed long term. The academy needs to be improved so that it is regularly producing good quality talent that is coming through, that is playing well, and that is feeding into the first team. That is an absolute must. We spend millions of pounds on this academy. We need it to produce players. The market is such now that finding outstanding young talent is hard work. It costs a lot of money. You've only got to look down south to see some of the fees that are paid for young up-and-coming promising talents down there. Even players moving from the English Championship, young and up-and-coming players to the English Premier League are still looking in the region of 15, 20, 25 million pounds. The academy to the first team, there needs to be a transition plan in place. For too long now, we have not used our academy. We have not brought through players. These players have not broken through or had an impact. Yes, there are the odd example, the odd person like a Nathan Patterson, for example. And then there are others who have broken through, but not enough that have broken through. Ross McCausland this season. We need a clear transition plan. We need to sell and clear deadwood. We need to get rid of the constantly injured players and find a way to stop those injuries constantly happening. And we also need to target key players and positions to move this club forward. In terms of the academy improvements, the first one has to be with the appointment of a new academy director. Obviously, with Zeb Jacobs now gone to Feyenoord, we need someone to come in who can really continue to revolutionise the academy, that can put into place, plans for the development of players, plans for talent identification, plans for bringing through players and finding those players and making sure those players are trained to the standards required and fit in with the tactics required by the first team. I think that there is a need, if you go down through every level of a club, for that club to play a similar shape and formation so that they understand as they move up the jobs they've got to do. And that will be something that I'm sure Niels Koppen will be looking at when appointing the new academy director, along obviously with Craig Robertson and James Bisgrove. For me as well, we need a clear plan to get those players to come from the academy into the first team. We need to see those players. We need to actually find those talents and use those talents. Now, I'm not saying for a minute that these talents should be starting from day one of next season, but certainly I think 2, 3, 4 youth players should be on the bench and getting 20 minutes here, 15 minutes there, especially against some of those other teams that are not great. The fact that Rangers should be, and I know this is a massive should be because it hasn't always happened, rolling over the likes of Ross County, the likes of St Johnstone, the likes of Hibs, the likes of Dundee, for example. And that's where we can use those young players. Now, there's a lot of young talent in that academy that I think we need to take a long, hard look at and find, are these players good enough? Can these players do a job for Rangers? Because you know what? If they can't, then we need to ship them out. We need to sell them, even if it is only for a minor fee, and continue with that progression. We cannot keep just bundling along saying, oh look, we've got these good young players, we've got such good young players, but we never see them. We never find out, are they good enough? And it's all very well and good producing these players, but if you don't actually use them in the first team, how will you ever know if they're good enough? And if they're not good enough, like I said, you move them on. I think as well, the Rangers have got to better use the loan market as well. Send out some of these players on loan to gain experience elsewhere if they're not going to play them in the first team. And I think they need to go on loan, whether that's to a Scottish Premiership team, a Scottish Championship team, or better still to send them down south to play in the English Championship, or into the continent to play as well. In terms of talents we've got coming through, this is not an exhaustive list. I know I've missed people off this, but these are players that I want to see next season have an involvement. Now, the transition plan needs to be that these players are training, as Philippe Clement said, with the first team squad. They are getting used to working with those first team players. They are getting used to working with the first team coaches. They are, learning the ways so that it's not a huge jump up from B team or from under 18s to first team. At this moment in time, if you're going straight from the B team or straight from the under 18s, straight into the squad and straight into a match day, you're not prepared, you're not ready for it. You need time working with that first team. That has got to be the transition. There needs to be somebody in place there to smooth that transition across. So the players we've got, I think, Cole McKinnon, John Lee Yefeko, Robbie Fraser. Robbie Fraser's done really well this season in those couple of games that he's played. I do think he needs to play a part next season. Cole McKinnon is another one who needs to play a part next season. Ishaka Thompson, upcoming, exciting striker. Paul Nisio, creative, quality midfielder. Archie Stevens, Josh Gentles, banging him in for fun. Leighton Grant, captain of the under-18s, very good central defender. And of course, my cause celebra, Bailey Rice. Again, Bailey Rice is a top quality talent. I want to see Bailey. I want to see what we've got in Bailey Rice. People talk about Lennon Miller from Motherwell. I think we forget that Bailey Rice was, in the Motherwell youth system. He was actually rated more highly than Lennon Miller, yet he hasn't made that breakthrough. Why is that? I don't know. Injuries, yes, partly, but also as well, I think, if you look at it, Michael Beale, credit to Michael Beale for this, did actually use Bailey Rice. He actually played Bailey Rice in a couple of games and Bailey didn't let us down. Philippe Clement obviously hasn't used Bailey, thinking he's not ready for this first team yet. So next season, I think we need to see Bailey. There needs to be some of these young players. We cannot replace an entire first team squad by spending money we haven't got. So first teams, so these youth products need to be used, in my opinion. And like I said, the plan needs to be they come in, they work with the first team, they train with the first team to get used to the levels, to the intensity, and then they come off the bench, play 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there to get up to speed with playing at the first team level. It takes time. It's not going to be an instant fix. It's very rare young players come through, burst straight onto the scene and suddenly become super talented superstars. We've got to obviously give them some patience. I know some of our fans are not famous for that, but we do need to get behind these guys, give these young players the chance. There's something really special about seeing players who've come through our youth academy, who go on to succeed, who go on to play, who go on to wear this jersey, who go on to run it at Ibrox. There's something a little bit more special about them than a £10 million player, in my estimation. Someone who loves the club to the core. Ross McCausland, for example, come through the youth system. I know he came from was signed from Northern Ireland, but he still was part of our youth system. He was a Rangers fan. He was on the terraces. He was. I think was it the last time we won a League Cup? He was actually in the crowd rather than on the pitch. Before the one we won against Aberdeen. So that's a Rangers man, and that's what we need to have on the field. Now, the third thing we need to do is to work with and clear out the deadwood. Now, I know this is not going to be easy. look, we have a lot of players at this club who are simply not good enough to play for Rangers, who are simply not of the level we require to be able to compete season in, season out with Celtic, to compete on the European stage. They are not good enough. And the issue we've got is quite simple. Some of them are still on 2, 3, 4-year contracts, have big wages, and moving them on is going to be exceptionally hard because let's face it, who's going to want to, say, sign Connor Goldson for 40 grand a week? Who's going to want to pay 30 grand a week to Ben Davis? Who's going to want to pay Tav 40, 50 grand a week, whatever Tav's on? That's the issue. That's the issue we've got. But we do need to try to either sell these players on, cancel contracts, do something with them to get them away from this club. Some of these players, it's not just the fact that they're not up to the task anymore, that they are kind of a poison within our dressing room, not deliberately, I'm not saying they deliberately go out to sabotage games or sabotage the managers, but they're filled with so much scar tissue, so much anxiety and worry about facing Celtic that no matter what happens, the moment we go up against them, they see those green and grey shirts and they just fall apart. They fall to pieces. They can't cope with it. And it all comes crashing down around them. And no matter how talented they are or how their numbers look or how good they are against Dundee or Ross County or against Hearts or Hibs, the moment they see the green and white hoops of Celtic, they lose their minds. They can't cope and they get run rings round and we lose the game. They've suffered for too long. And you find that if you are constantly banged down and put down by that same person or opponent, season in, season out, it has a mental toll on you. And I think the damage is far too far gone with some of these players to bring them back. Now, this is not, I think, this is going to be difficult. The out-of-contract players, and I'm not going to include Seamer and Silva and Cortez in this because they're loan players. We'll talk about them another day. Balogun, I would give a new contract to, a 1-year deal. I think, he's good enough to be a backup, good enough to be a reserve. I'm not saying start him, but you cannot get rid of absolutely everybody from the squad. He does need, I think, to be there next season. I think we need to go out and get a couple of centre-backs, which I'll talk about in a minute. And Balogun, Davis, I think, good enough to be backups. They're good enough to be backup centre-halves. They're not good enough to start. They're not good enough to be the main centre back, but they are good enough to be backups. Out of contract players, Barisic obviously is already gone. He'll be going to Trabzon. I think Lundstrom has to go. I do not want to see Lundstrom back at this club under any circumstances next season. He's slow, he's negative, he passes back too much. And again, he's one of these players that carries such mental scarring against Celtic. He cannot cope anymore. He's already beaten before he takes the field against them. McLaughlin, obviously, who I'd even forgot at one stage at the club. Roof, injury prone. Jack, injury prone. Silva, I have included on this list. I don't, he's not a player I want to keep. I do want to try and keep Seamer. I do want to try and keep Cortez. Now, sell. This is in a particular order that I've gone for. Tav and Goldson at top of my list to sell, to get rid of. We've got to get rid of them. Now, I know that's going to upset a few Rangers fans. I know that's going to upset the Tav fanboys out there. I know Tav's had great numbers for the club. But we cannot keep relying on our right back to take penalties, to put the ball in the back of the net. We cannot rely on a right back to score goals. And people say, where are the goals going to come from? Well, that's where the new signings come in. That's where the new midfielders come in. That's where getting the best out of the likes of Cortez, Diamande, Cantwell, McCausland, McKinnon, players like that to score us goals. Danilo, players we've already got here, getting extra from them. Now, I'd even trust Dessers to take a penalty if needs be. But, let the striker take the penalty. That's what he's there for. Cantwell take a penalty. Seamer take a penalty if he's still here next season. All of them, I think, can take a penalty just as well as Tav. Tav's done. His legs are gone. Maida runs rings round him in every single Old Firm game. And again, on Saturday, Maida ran rings round him. He is done. He is absolutely done. And if Tav is still here next season and he is starting at right back and he is captain of this club, nothing changes. Absolutely nothing changes. The club will be in a dire position again and Clement will lose his job. The same if Goldson's still here. Again, lost a yard of pace, lost his confidence, doesn't look good, doesn't look the player he was a season ago, 2 seasons ago, has to go. Scott Wright, another one who is never a Rangers player, got to go. Cyril Dessers, if he's 29 years old, he isn't going to develop or get any better. Now, he scored 22 goals this season, but he missed 28 big chances. He should be sitting on 35, 40 goals this season. He's missed so many easy chances. Ross County, 2 chances. He scores both those. We win that game. Parkhead, he scores that. The game's different. Hearts, 4 chances. He misses them all. He scores one. We win that game. I could go on. The number of chances this man's missed is just ridiculous. He is not Rangers standard number 9. He has to be sold in the summer. And if we can get 3.5, 4 million, 4.5, 5 million pounds for him, great. I'm sure there's some Italian club that we can con into getting that money out of. Matondo, for me, too inconsistent. Dow, too injury prone. Lawrence, too injury prone. Hadji, another one who I think needs to be sold. He doesn't want to come back. He wants to stay in Spain. So for me, if we can ship out those players now, look, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about how much money we're going to get for those players. We are not going to get a king's ransom for Tav, Goldson, Wright, Dessers, Matondo, Dowell, Lawrence, and Hadji. Never going to happen. Not going to happen. It's not. Sometimes you've got to just accept and cut your losses and take the money that clubs are offering. And that's what's going to happen with these ones, because we've got to move on. And like I said, if we run out next season at the first game of the season and Tav and Goldson are both starting for this team, then there's problems. There is big, big problems in this team, huge problems. And we will be straight back in the mire and having a discussion at the end of the next season. Well, what do we change? How are Celtic 3 trophies ahead of us now, or 2 trophies ahead of us now? We need to do something and do something radical. Now, in terms of what we need to bring into the club, I think there is 9 players minimum that we need to bring into the club. Now, some of these could be through youth prospects. Some of these could be through free transfers or loans. We've got to use the full market. We've got to use every penny that's available to us and be smart in our deals. We need 2 centre forwards, in my opinion. Danilo and 2 others, minimum 1 centre forward, but 2 preferably. 2 centre backs. We need a new right back. Dujon Sterling can play right back, I know, but for me, Sterling is a better central defensive midfield player. So I do think we need to play him there. He's got energy. He's got get up and go. He runs forward. He breaks tackles. He makes tackles. He brings an energy, a speed. And I think that's something we need in our midfield if we're going to threaten them next season. So for me, Sterling to midfield, buy a right back. We need another CDM to obviously back up Dio, Raskin, and Sterling. I think that's our 3 that we keep as our core. Someone else, 4 players there. You need to have 2 players virtually for every position, so that when you're competing on four fronts, you've got the players to pick from. And we're not in a situation like we were at the end of this season where we are putting square pegs in round holes because we haven't got enough players, but missing so many players. We need an attacking midfielder, another number 10, I think, either to back Cantwell up or to replace Cantwell, somebody who's going to be that creative influence. A right winger and a left winger. Now, one of those could be Seema, one could be Cortez, McCausland, and I think another, just to sort of supplement. Again, I think if we've got McCausland, we buy Seema, we buy Cortez. I'll bring Cortez in on loan, which has been discussed about, and sign one other. Then you've got 4 again, 2 for every position. Again, strength in depth. That's what we need. We've got obviously Liam Kelly. We've got a backup goalkeeper now if Robbie McCrory departs. So look, you do need 2 players for every position. Now, we've got to put our trust in Philippe Clement. He's already identified that it is the end of a cycle. He is quite clear about that, that we need to change. We need to evolve. We need to have this revolution, and we need to fulfill, I think, those positions of need. It's going to be a fascinating summer to see how this club rebuilds. I'm optimistic that Coppen and Clement can get this right, that we've got people that know what they're doing. Coppen at PSV brought in the likes of Veerman, Sibari, Lang, Bakayoko. He brought some real talent into that club. The players we brought in so far, Cortez looked good before he got injured. Diamande looks quality. Silva obviously was the slight dodgy one. But, we've done it. They've done it already. They've kind of started to really prove that they've got the that worldwide scouting network in place now as well. Hefte's now on in. Cordoba's rumoured. There's names being linked that we wouldn't have been linked with before. There's a new optimism, I think, because of the fact we've got a rapidly expanded scouting network that is looking all across Europe, all across Eastern Europe, looking across South America, looking across Scandinavia, looking all around the world, in effect, for talent to bring into the club. And that, for me, is the right way forward. We can't keep going down south, signing these players who are out of contract from the championship clubs or have got an injury history from championship clubs and going, oh, well, we can get them back to their best. We can get them back to full fitness. That doesn't work. For me, we need to do those 4 things. We need to obviously build this squad back up, put in place a new medical department, look at how we train these players. Now, Clement has already talked about the fact that he does need to improve these pre-season, and he says the pre-season will be very different and we should look out for huge changes. I think the strength and conditioning will be all part of that to eliminate the injuries. Part of why I think we get so many injuries, so many muscle injuries, is that preparation, that strength and conditioning is obviously not to the standard needed to keep these players going. Well, guys, that's my theory of how we get this back. 4 things we could do. There's a whole load of other things, obviously, around infrastructure, around coaching, around the board, which we'll discuss on another video. But let me know what you think of what I've talked about this morning, this afternoon, or this evening. And obviously, please help the channel to keep on growing. Please smash that sub. Okay, guys, as always, on the way out, I ask 2 things of you. 1, smash that like. It defeats that evil algorithm. And number 2, remember always, we are the people.